Okay, hey, so this is my review for the Mary Poppins Returns Soundtrack. The soundtrack actually came out like a couple weeks ago. Came out before the movie came out. The movie is actually coming out like December 21st. The soundtrack came out like December 7th. So there's a bit of time to listen to the soundtrack, see if it's good or not. And what really happened without seeing the movie is the soundtrack really can't be compared to the original. The soundtrack that came out 54 years ago, a lot of people are calling it one of the best movie soundtracks of all time. So the expectations are maybe a bit too high. You can see how any new soundtrack coming out now or after that original soundtrack would be leaning towards like being less of a soundtrack compared to that one. It's kind of like a greater than or less than thing. So the original Mary Poppins soundtrack too actually won 2 Academy Awards and 2 Grammys. So why come back to this Mary Poppins movie now after 54 years? They couldn't make another movie until now because it seems like they had a hard time working with the author who this Mary Poppins movies kind of originated from. And apparently the author didn't even want to make the first film, and she didn't really like it. And it was hard to work with her, and Disney really wanted to push out another film, but they never were able to put out another film. Now that the author's gone, Disney has like this new team that's been working on doing remakes, like with The Lion King, and it wasn't the same king as The Lion King, but they worked on this one too and kind of brought it back. For the soundtrack, the original Sherman Brothers haven't come back. These are the guys that were the people who made the Supercala, song, The Spoonful of Sugar, and other classic songs from that won like the Academy Awards and the Academy Awards. One of them passed away in 2012, while the other one worked on this film like as a musical consultant. We're not sure how much consulting he was actually doing. So the people that actually made this soundtrack were these hairspray guys, Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman, and they tried to kind of fuse like some parts of this older soundtrack from 1964 into this one. That might kept like some of the songs good, but it's still got like this brew. It's not as potent as the original one, and the hit songs don't compare to the original. There's a lot of people waiting for the movie to come out before they even look at the soundtrack. But a really good movie soundtrack shouldn't need like the movie to come out if it's a classic. So for people who've listened to the soundtrack though, they're saying the movie's a disappointment. It's not living up to the original 54 years ago. No surprise. It's not on Metacritic, but there's this site called Trackwave, and it shows like what percentage of critics like albums. It has a 60% on more than like 60 reviews or so. So it gives a pretty good idea, I think, what they're saying. They're saying that the songs aren't that bad, but they're not that good either. Especially they're not as good as the original soundtrack, and that's what you're gonna find. They're thinking about the original soundtrack. It's hard not to think about the original soundtrack. They're trying to compare this new movie with that classic movie. It's really not fair. It's hard to make 2 classic movies in a row, especially coming back with a different team after so many years. It's hard to make anything that compares to the original. But if you kind of forget about the original movie or soundtrack, you can kind of agree that the soundtrack is kind of good for a movie. And that's what you're seeing. Where you're seeing it at a 60%, it's because the soundtrack's not bad. It's sitting there because you're not seeing that it's not, or you're seeing that it's not bad, but it's not like extremely good, like a classic. The soundtrack's mainly getting hit for not having a catchy song on it, like on the original soundtrack, like Spoonful of Sugar, like I said, the Super Caliph, the other songs on there from the original. There's a lot of people that remember them. That's the huge disappointment here. A lot of people want a classic song like the original. They're kind of demanding it. You want to get the honey from the hive. People are really connecting to this film with hooking onto the old film too, and they can't help but feel disappointed that the songs from this movie aren't like the songs in that movie. It's hard to remember some of the songs from this soundtrack. They're saying the songs kind of sound like each other, which makes it hard to remember any of them in particular. There's not really one song that stands out. For the Grammy Awards or the Academy Awards, there's nothing that really stands out. And they're saying that they only listen to it like once. They can't tell if the songs are good or not. Maybe they have to listen to the songs like 1,000 more times to remember them. It's kind of agreed that the songs are like really forgettable. And despite what people are saying, don't throw this movie or the soundtrack away just yet. It's hard to remember some of the songs, but the people reviewing this are old people. It's not the kids reviewing it. Unless kids are kind of talking to their parents who are critics. We haven't really heard from them yet. And kids are a really important part of soundtracks. It's hard to know what they're going to say yet. And they matter because they might like the soundtrack and then they might play it over and over again. Kind of like with the Greatest Showman soundtrack that came out last year. That made it to be like the top selling album of 2018 with over 1 million copies sold. Really blew everyone away. Just stayed at the top of the music charts all year. And now everybody's wondering if there's any other soundtracks that can do the same thing. But it might have just been a one-time thing. Maybe comparing the Mary Poppins soundtrack to that, you can't really compare the two. But we'll have to see when people go to the movies. They like the songs, they just forget about them. But so far, it's missing the mark on it being like that original soundtrack from 54 years ago. People are leaving the movies. A lot of them aren't remembering the songs. But who knows? Maybe it'll take another 54 years to see if this soundtrack lasts and takes off. But the thing is, though, that they'd be beating the odds with this movie coming back as a classic movie, too. So check out my other videos, and if I have reviews and such, I put up some special Christmas videos, too, that you can see, and subscribe.